On April 5th, 1911, 400,000 people lined the rain-drenched sidewalks of New York. As an empty horse-drawn hearse crept from the dank, narrow streets of the Lower East Side toward the skyscrapers towering over Madison Square. New Yorkers from all walks of life had come to pay tribute to the unidentified victims of the Triangle Fire, the deadliest workplace accident in the city's history. A few weeks earlier, the workers had been forgotten cogs in America's immense industrial machine. Now, 1 in 10 New Yorkers were there to claim them as their own.
Public conscience thought they had failed these young women. They had somehow not protected them.
There was a recognition of, wait, these girls can't die in vain. That was said over and over and over again, as if the city had somehow turned its back on them.
If there weren't massive funerals, it would have been very easy for the city and the city officials to say, well, this is it's sort of a natural disaster, it's a terrible thing, but there's nothing anyone can do about it.
If you ask the average American, is it okay for workers to work in a shop where the conditions are so dangerous that it could cost them their lives and not have government intervene? Most people would say no. There's a line. The Triangle Fire drew that line. It burned that line, really, into the nation's conscience.
Every morning, 6 days a week, more than 100,000 people poured out onto the streets of the Lower East Side, headed toward another day's work in the city's garment factories. Many were young women in their teens. Some were girls as young as 10. They were immigrants, Italians who had fled natural disaster, Jews who had escaped persecution in Russia, Ukraine, Poland. Their families had chosen America for its promise of a better future. But even the youngest daughters had come to understand that their precarious hold on the American dream depended on their willingness to work.
Father had to take me to the shop and not be late for his own work. I was eager to begin life on my own responsibility, but was also afraid. "Don't look so frightened," he said.
These young girls weren't just earning money for their own clothes or to, go out to a dance hall or to Coney Island. They were earning money to support the family.
Economic security was the American dream for many of them. Making enough money to be able to put food on the table, not worry about making rent for the week.
As the throng disappeared into sweatshops and tenement apartments, several hundred workers veered off toward the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory in the heart of Greenwich Village. At the base of the Ash Building, men and women stepped into wooden freight elevators to ascend to the Triangle Factory on the 8th and 9th floors. Workers like Michaela Marciano, who managed to send a few dollars to her family in Italy every month. Or Julia Rosen, whose 17-year-old son worked alongside her to help support 3 younger children. Or Catherine Maltese, whose 13-year-old daughter wasn't too young to join her on the factory floor.
Getting a job in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was a pretty desired position because they were working in a much more modern factory environment. High ceilings, big windows, compared to the coal stove heated, dusty hugely crowded sweatshop rooms. Triangle was a plum.
But even at the Triangle, sewing machine operators faced a 14-hour workday for $2 a day at most. And that was before bosses docked their pay for the needles, the thread, the electricity they used.
Sometimes you work at a big machine, and it's not working right. One of the needles skips, and you get blamed for mistakes.
The same machines, the same surrounding. Shirtwaists, shirtwaists, and more shirtwaists.
On the 10th floor, the Triangle owners could feel their vast machine shuddering below. Max Blank and Isaac Harris had made Triangle $1 million a year behemoth, mass-producing the garment every modern woman must have, the shirtwaist. Harris and Blank were known as the Shirtwaist Kings, but their empire, as they saw it, was under constant siege. After 20 years, the shirtwaist was getting stale. Fashion editors began to showcase colorful dresses for the modern woman and turned up their noses at the bourgeois waist. No matter how much silk embroidery Harris added to their designs, the Triangle sales charts sloped down. Material and shipping costs seemed always to be rising. Profit margins matched this year's fashion, teasingly sheer.
For Max and Isaac, there was this constant awareness that they were, as successful and as rich as they were one bad season away from being broke. The competition was enormously fierce. 500 blouse makers on the island of Manhattan alone.
While they're getting the orders from the department stores, there's some small shop half a mile away that's willing to beat them by half. So it's all about continuous production to get as much cloth turned into a product as possible at the lowest possible price.
That summer, there was a growing new threat. All over the city, garment workers were agitating for shorter hours, better pay, safer shops, unions. Harris and Blank saw it in the papers every day and on the streets below. Workers were walking off the job by the tens, scores, hundreds. The partners even suspected talk of union on their own shop floor.
Unionization was the single largest fear for most of these employers. They were terrified that unions would come in because that would diminish their authority over the workplace.
The right to control their own factory was an article of faith for Harris and Blank, as for hundreds of business owners just like them.